Good morning. Just still almost afternoon, but it's a little bit before 11, 12 o'clock Sunday. What day is today? I don't remember. It's the 20th. Holy heavens. So not too far from Halloween and not too far from the next Halloween, which would be the election day, which is another conversation. Uh, Yankees won last night. So life is good on that count. Now we just have to see the Giants win a game, and Grandpa will be very much more happy. And enough said about that. This video that I'm about to bring up will speak for from today through next Monday. I think next Monday. Yes. Yeah, next Monday. I'm going to be away next weekend, and don't want to. I didn't want to. I wanted to make sure I got the whole week's covered in a sense. You're also going to find, if you haven't already begun to notice, that I'm going to get more and more repetitive as we start to come around the bend towards the end of the semester. Believe it or not, if today's the 20th, that would make us what, about 5 or 6 weeks out to the end of the semester, including the Thanksgiving weekend. And so life begins to squeeze a little bit. If you haven't already noticed, I sent an email out to everybody 2 or 3 days ago, desperately requesting that you send me your um, tentative topics for your strategic plan. I'm kind of surprised that only two people now have offered their ideas to me. Um, I can't. You're all adults, so I'm not going to. After this minute, I'm not going to bring it up anymore. But I was hoping that you would be sending your tentative topic to me so I could give you feedback on it. I would be not to your advantage if you would have come in on the 5th with something that I didn't necessarily think was a worthy topic. So if I were you, I'd send me something, and not a big long dissertation, a line, a topic, and I will be happy to give you feedback about that, or answer any questions you may have about what you're trying to figure out. And I'm pretty good at that, and I think I can help you with that. But right hand up. I don't see it looks like a left hand on the screen, but it's my right hand. I'm not going to ask anymore. Again, everybody's over 21 and understands what it takes to make a graduate class be effective for you. And so again, as I said, I'm going to I'm going to repeat myself more often in the hope of helping you meld a few things together. Of course, there's about change, about strategic planning. That topic is far too broad for what the syllabus suggests in many respects, in the sense that there's a spectrum of skill sets that you need to be aware of and have some sort of mastery about that is not spoken to in the Fulham book specifically anyway. Alluded to, hinted at, but nothing particularly deep about what may be required. And I know I've said before that once you get your strategic plan completed, you will have had developed skill sets or be familiar with skill sets, probably a better way to put it, that few current practicing administrators have. Uh, so you'll have an advantage over that when you interview for positions, and even a better advantage when you begin to take charge of actual changes that you mean to take in place. Now, I'll give you a quick example. I'm talking too much already. And I'm talking vaguely. Not that any of you could connect what I'm alluding to specifically. Uh, One of my daughters is an English teacher and in a middle school, and she was crazy the other day. She texted me and emailed me to say that the new department chair in the English in this district is introducing a technology program. I'm not familiar with the program, although I think I'm familiar with the idea of it. It's a tech program to teach reading by way of computer machine learning, or if I have this correct, that includes homework assignments and instructional time each month. And my daughter, being more like her father than she's willing to admit, kind of is bridling at this because she doesn't like the imposition on her instructional time and doesn't think that the program is particularly effective and cannot find any research to support that the program is uh, is effective, except for research that comes from the company that produced it, which I put about 2 cents worth of nothing into that when I see those kinds of research reviews. And so she's objecting, and she's saying to me, Dad, nobody asked us what we thought about it. This said this is what you need, what you have to do, and that this was necessary. But we don't know why it was necessary. Although, I mean, from forever having run English teachers and secondary education curriculum for a long time, anytime this idea of the kids can't read in high school or middle school for that matter, had sometimes has validity, but it also begs the question about who's responsible for teaching reading in secondary schools. We know that in elementary, it's a heavy hitter, it's a priority, as it should be. And nor should the instruction in reading mastery end in the end of sixth grade or fifth grade. I mean, that's not too smart. And typically, what will come down to, I've run into it more than once, is the objection from the social studies teacher, from the math teacher, the science teacher, the art people, and so forth. But essentially the core academic subjects, but beyond, will say, "Ain't my job. My job is to, you know, teach aquatic equations, quadratic equations, if there is such a thing taught anymore. And it's not my job to teach reading, where in fact, that's few things can be further from the truth. If nothing else, uh, good readers are able to think critically. And since if we're talking about interdisciplinary learning and what we really want students to be able to do when they graduate from high school, whether they go on to college or not, is to have them be able to think critically, choose who they really want to vote for an election, as an example. And so that's all about our critical thinking skills and evaluation, higher level thinking skills out of Bloom's taxonomy. And so I can't help but agree with my daughter uh, about the premise, because as far as I can tell, the implementation of this is totally unilateral. No buy-in from the troops, so to speak, and being implemented, if I understand this correctly, wholesale. That is to say, everybody's going to do this tomorrow. I'm probably exaggerating that, but you know what I'm driving at. And as I have said to you, haven't hit this very hard, but I have mentioned it to you. You don't put changes in place unless it's some sort of blood on the floor, arteries open premise. You don't put, especially instructional changes in place, whole hog. The metaphor I usually use, and I may have used it in a previous video, is those of you who remember Tom and Jerry cartoons, not everybody your age do, um, uh, remember that I think the cat is Tom. And Tom, the cat, is trying to catch Jerry the mouse, and the mouse is making a fool out of the cat. In almost every cartoon that people used to see back in the day, Tom would get a shotgun or a blunderbuss that shoots many pellets out all over the place to try to shoot at the mouse. Invariably would miss the mouse and blow out a whole wall because the bullets or the pellets spray out and might capture whom you're shooting at, and then again will destroy everything else around it. When in fact, Tom should be using a pea shooter or a single shooter, so that though it's harder to do, it's more likely not to destroy everything around it. There's plenty of analogies in war about this, but well, that's another conversation. And so the wise thing to do, this is by way of Peter Senge, who wrote the systems thinking approaches I've alluded to in this course, is you pilot something. You don't try to do a whole hog implementation. Again, unless it's, some kind of crisis emergency thing. That's a different story. You pilot something so that you minimize the potential damage if there's something wrong with the change. And it gives you a chance to formatively, and I know I've used that word in this course, uh, rewire what you're doing so that you don't cause uh, unwanted damage. The projected outcomes, in fact, are accounted for, at least one projected outcome. And one more example, and I'm pretty sure I've given this one too. When a new model of a car comes out, or any electronic thing, I think too, but lately, but when a new model of a car comes out, that car has been field tested back at the factory hundreds of thousands of miles sometimes, and for maybe a couple of years before they'll put that car in the showroom after they've field tested all of the different aspects of what comprises an automobile, so they don't have any kind of concerns or complaints from the customer when they finally do sell them to their public. That's piloting. In the United States, in schooling, we tend, as I think you can infer, we do the Tom and Jerry thing. We don't do the pilots necessarily, and that's a mistake. I implemented a new literacy program in the elementary schools just before I left, actually. And I have to tell you, I don't think it necessarily all took after I left, but I implemented a program, a whole literacy program. For those of you who teach reading, you know what I'm talking about. And I knew it was complex, and I knew it was an expensive proposition for a district, customarily not too anxious to spend money. Uh, I knew both of those things, but I also knew we had to change from what we were doing. Although it was moderately effective for the kids who could read easily enough, there were a lot of kids who were falling by the wayside with it, or not getting the most out of critical thinking and critical reading and writing. And so we did a lot of research. I had a committee could do a lot of research, all sorts of things, and we had presentations from this publishing company or another, and reading experts, and eventually we settled on the whole literacy program. Uh, but I also knew it was so complex, I couldn't march it out to 3,000, almost 4,000 kids at the time. Couldn't do that because we didn't know if, how well we were going to get our PD off the ground and how well it was going to take. And so I looked around the district and I had two principals, geographically north and south, uh, which was a good thing politically for me to be observant of. And these these two principals, we had several principals, north and south, but these two principals were reading experts and had come out of the city, New York City. And so they were very trained in some of the things that we were going to put in place down the line. So what I did was I took the two principals in and I said, I want to pilot it in your buildings, north and south, because when things go wacky or things aren't working right, we'll know what to do when we roll it out. In the next phase, with the next set of elementary principals, where I always teachers, schools, I should say, when I thought that I had principals there who were tuning into what the program was about, which wasn't always the case. So I had to move relatively slowly on that, which was kind of annoying. I mean, part of me wanted to just put it in place all at once, but I knew that we had to move slowly. Luckily, I had a fantastic reading literacy person who worked was one of my assistants, and she really did. She was out in the trenches doing the homework and taking the pulses of each of these buildings, and we realized there were things we needed to do. Some of it was just mechanical things. Get a room where we could put books was one. One of them was training reading specialists differently from how we were training reading specialists to learn this new program and to practice rolling it out in among the teachers. And so as we began to roll it out, that we would have meetings and we would say, well, this worked, but that didn't work, or you may want to do this first rather than second. And the rollout went out fairly smoothly, notwithstanding the fact that I left toward the tail end of this. I retired, and thought I had everything in motion, and then there were some things that never did happen, but that's more of a political issue, economic issue than uh, uh, a strategic planning. I mean, although I maybe should have projected for that because I should have continued itself without my having my thumb in the middle of the pie. That I will grant as I'm thinking out loud. And so we go back to the strategic plan that we've been talking about, and we're going to revisit some of the same things. So bear with me. As soon as I find what I'm looking for. Okay, now this is going to look pretty similar to what I've been putting out the last week or two, and that's okay. Hopefully you can see this. I don't know how to make this bigger. Oh, I think I can do this. I'm talking to myself. All right, you can see that better. Now, this in green is misleading because I haven't put this video link up on the screen up on this agenda item, so you don't have that yet, but you will have this agenda item with the YouTube address. Sometimes Canvas lets me just download the video, and sometimes it doesn't. So I have to be prepared to go. I have to prepare for a projected future as such. I also put the discussion question, which is up but not open. Yeah, either it's in Canvas, but I mean I think maybe it opens today. But here's the discussion question. There's no right or wrong answer to this. The question is really your opinion based on what your own observations and experiences. And it asks you, what do you project? And that word project is an important word. It's a futures word. What do you project are educators' future challenges over the next 5 years that will warrant change solutions? I'll give you one, and if we've said it more than once, and several of you being ESL teachers can take the charge on this. Uh, we have to find ways to narrow the gaps between and among general education students and E&L students. I mean, that's almost like a moral obligation. It's an equity issue. It's an instructional issue. It cannot be ignored. I mean, that challenge is now. It's not even 5 years out, and I can't necessarily project what the trend will be on that necessarily. But all of you are aware, whether you're E&L teachers or not. I'm sure that you all have heard the issues associated with this many times. So that's the DQ, and when you do it substantiated with what research you can find, there's some in Fullen toward the end of the chapter of the book, but all you would need to do is do a little more research here and there, and you come up with some pretty solid substantiation of your point of view. And then I expect you to interchange with each other. And I continue to say that I continue to have the same problem figuring out what the threads are. And I'm meeting with a person about that next week to see if I can straighten that out for me. Okay, so that's housekeeping. The only assignment that's sitting out there for you this moment, I will stick in that other third assignment of the syllabus. Well, first assignment is DQs. The last assignment is strategic planning. The other one is SMART goals. And I'm not sure how I want to handle that because I kind of feel like all of you know how to write SMART goals, and you'll see them within the plan anyway. I'll probably introduce that next week as I'm talking to myself. You notice I'm skipping over the second bullet. And then you can see what I'm doing now is highlighting what I highlighted last week, which was 2 futures forecasting strategies, futures wheels, and cross impact matrices, or matrix or chart, whichever word works for you. And I highlighted them in yellow because they go together. They are two of many, what I call two-dimensional um, futures forecasting strategies, surface strategies, cause and effect. This follows then follows this. Relatively short-term futures and not necessarily all the analytical yet. However, I need to reiterate this in the chart that you've already seen maybe a million times, is that even a two-dimensional futures forecasting is a consequence of great, not just good, great information gathering. The example I gave you that my daughter is concerned about is clearly an example of inadequate, I'm trying to be polite, inadequate information gathering. Someone's not happy with reading scores. Someone thinks that reading should be taught only by the English teachers. Someone thinks that technology is the answer and has found a program that does some kind of machine learning approach to walk the children through that, taking away 2 hours worth of instructional time. If you think about it, if you have in secondary, if you're teaching 40 minutes a day to a class, that's 200 minutes. That's 3 hours and 20 minutes worth of time. And you times 4 weeks, that's 12 hours. It's about 13 hours worth of instructional time a month per subject, roughly speaking. And you're taking 2 hours away from that. So I don't know let's make it 12. So 2 hours, we'll make it 14. So 2 hours of 14 is 1/7 of your time of your instructional time has been taken away. And those of you who teach secondary know that that's not a small chunk. It's not a majority chunk, but it's a noticeable one as such. This is a pretty serious situation that needs more attention as such. And so even a two-dimensional strategy thinking uh, uh, has some implications that are going to get lower when we get to three-dimensional. We're going to have some fun with that, and probably around Thanksgiving, maybe a little bit before that. So once again, this is the same template, and somebody asked this question. I want to reiterate it. You're going to post this template in the assignment section of Canvas. In addition, you're going to upload a brief PowerPoint, 6 or 7 slides. If it's more than 7, I'm going to send you back to the drawing board, where you're going to present those 6 or 7 slides to your colleagues that on December 5th and our last live session. And it just occurred to me I should mention that the next live session, as you know, it's been pushed up because of the Thanksgiving holiday. So it's actually the 7th. So it's not too far from now. Just so you know, that make a date to see me on the 7th. Be a couple of days after the election if you're looking for some kind of guidepost. So here we go again. In this case, I'm using the same model for the sake of brevity. I identified a goal which could be deeper, quite frankly, could be deeper, but it's deep enough to get you off the ground. And I said, there's one goal here, all right? And I wrote it backwards, so I'll explain it both ways. To eliminate achievement gaps among all student subsets to assure equity. That's one way to say it. A better way to say it would be to more nearly assure equity by eliminating achievement gaps. But in either case, it's the same premise. Let's eliminate achievement gaps. All right. Among not only E&L babies, but also any other group of people of children who need some form of instructional assistance or attention. And so that's a wide gamut of kids we know. And we want to make it better, all right? And now I said that the first thing we need to do is heavy duty needs assessments. Not surface things like I just shared with you. Heavy duty needs assessment with root cause analyses. Now I'm going to model one for you. I think I'm going to put it down here so I don't forget. Oh, no, I have it up there, right? Okay. Everyone's going to do a squat. In other words, you're not going to show me the squat. I'm going to trust you on this. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats in a quadrant. where you're going to take the issue that you're examining and try to identify the strengths of it, or what the issues may be about the school, insofar as the problem may be concerned, what weaknesses you perceive, what threats you perceive, and what opportunities for goals. Now, I'm going to explain threats a little better. Though most of you, many of you, I think, teach in a city, so you can relate to this. But even those of you who work on the suburbs who also can recognize this as an issue. And begin to seeing it. I see the trend going in more nearly in this threat direction than it's worth, based on my own research and experiences. And that would be a threat is charter schools, when you're pulling children out of school because they don't think their children are getting what they need. Homeschooling. I have strong opinions about homeschooling, many of them negative from experiences. But homeschooling is a growing trend for all kids. Uh, Parochial schools has always been an alternative to public schools for any number of reasons. The primary reason that parents prefer that their children are being getting education in whichever religion that's represented by the parochial school, but not always. Often, or sometimes, and I don't know the percentages on this, children will attend a parochial/private school because they don't think they're effective, and that the children will learn better in the charter school, or rather the parochial schools. I'm thinking of one school district not too far from Molloy that I'm not sure if there's any charter schools there, but I do know there was this is a couple of years back, there was some dissatisfaction with the public school, not terrible dissatisfaction, more of a fear that the demography was going to change. And uh, I don't know the percentages, but there was a good chunk of children in the district who were Jewish. And what happened was that some Jewish parochial schools were set up that were siphoning off kids from the public school over to their school, which meant there was loss of state aid for the public school is one thing, which is a problem with charter schools too. And it became kind of problematic. A little anecdote: I ran a strategic plan in this building in this district, and superintendent very wisely invited Jewish leaders from the various Jewish centers and I think principals from the schools, and invited them to be part of the committee. And I have to say that those people were falling all over themselves trying to be cooperative with the public school system. It was really very uh, encouraging. I'm not sure if that's true everywhere, but certainly we know that those are all threats to the public schools. Opportunities is a word I don't like, but it works. It fits with the anagram, so to speak. I think of opportunities as goals more than I call it an opportunity. But I'll use the opportunity word so that you can recognize it. Opportunity is a chance to use a strength or even a weakness and leverage it back to a goal that you can use to hit the need that you're trying to solve. And so SWOT I expect you to do a SWOT. And I probably should expect you to show it, but I'm not, because I have enough things to do. But professionally trusting you to try to perform a SWOT. What we could do too is on the November 7th thing, I'm gonna do that. Now, somebody has to remind me because I'm not gonna write it down now. But one of you, Lauren, you're sort of my conscience sometimes. Lauren, do me a favor. I'm talking too fast. Do me a favor and remind me to model a SWOT with the class again. So yes, I want you to do a SWOT, and yes, I want you to do a 5 why. I've modeled this for you. Here it comes again. A 5 why is a Japanese business technique that expects that when you get to the fifth why, after you ask 5 why questions, you really know what it is you're complaining about, worried about, not surface issues. not surface issues. I'll give you one that I heard, and that I'm not going to model all the way through, but I get to the root cause, and it's going to perhaps offend some of you. So I apologize in advance. Uh, did a strategic plan several years ago upstate, and uh, the issue of threats came up. And what the threats were was, the parents were pulling their kids out and putting them in various parochial schools of all kinds of religions. It wasn't just Jewish people or other religious groups, and brought them in. We five-wide them. I five-wide them. Why did you pull your children out of the public school system? Not satisfied with it. Why are you not satisfied with it? I don't feel my children are reading or learning as well as I want them to do. Why do you feel that way? The homework looks too easy, or they don't give homework. Why do you think that's a concern? Because I don't know why. I don't know why they aren't getting practice in the skills they're supposedly learning. Why do you think that's the case? Because there's no communication with the district. Turned out there wasn't. That was a root cause. The parents really weren't kept informed of what the faculty, rather what the school district was trying to do by way of the children. Legitimate issue. And so we had to plug up that hole as such. I've already talked about surveys. That's it's a worthy premise if you can find or create good surveys. I talked about that already. Sometimes people use a lot of really rotten ones. I remember there was a commercial on TV about a toothpaste ad, and 98% of dentists say brushing your teeth is a great way to prevent cavities. Do you agree with that? What are you supposed to say to that? Yes or no? It's a silly question.
Regular dental visits and good brushing and flossing habits are the best ways to protect your teeth from cavities.
I don't know why that came up.
This is from the Mayo Clinic.
Thank you, Mayo Clinic. I didn't plan that. It came up on my computer. And so surveys have to be very carefully constructed. And if they're not worth it. Then it's just not worth it. So be careful if you decide to use those as such. Trying to get that out of it. All right, good. No, I did the wrong thing. Ugh, there it is. All right, so surveys has worth, but you have to be cautious about them. Focus groups much more, I think, much more effective, presuming that you can get a sample of a group of folks and give them a chance to talk to each other. So what you do is you bring them into a room, you give them a cup of coffee, and you have some planned questions, and let people talk to each other, talk to you. And what you do is get a transcript of that, and then you take the transcript back, and then you try to figure out what the themes are and what the discrepancies may be among the group. And then you begin to squeeze in, and then you begin to see what the issues actually are. It's kind of an extension of the 5 why, if you think about it. Great value to that. That's called a qualitative approach. Surveys are quantitative, and unless you're very sophisticated with how you want to use factor analyses in the surveys, you're going to miss the boat on some things. But focus groups are more likely to yield some good points that you need to put into the pot to think about some more. I mentioned field trips already. Field trips to successful districts is a good opportunity to do some good thing, or go to a conference and hear some premises along those lines. And then after the conference is over, to go to the person presenting and say, could you come to my district and comment on the issues that we're talking about, so other people can hear you, and we can kick these things around. So you bring experts in. Good experts to bring in at minimum would be demographers, and there almost always are demographers in districts with some sort of set of skills. They may not be experts, trained demographers, but there's ways to look at how trends are going. in a district where the someone else, not myself, but a friend of mine, actually did a very deep demographic study of the district. And he came back and said to the board that 5 years from that date, the district's uh, white to diverse or non-white population will flip from 60% white, 40% not white, to 40% not white and 60% diverse within 5 years. And the board didn't want to hear that. The white board didn't want to hear that. And they fired him. And by George, he was right. And so he had rightly demonstrated the trend, and the dispositions weren't amenable to what the trend was what the research was telling them. Um, and debates is sort of like a panel discussion. I think you understand that. In data analyses, the cleanest word is the word I just used actually was trend analysis. A trend, I mean, I don't know how many of you are paying attention. I am. Every Sunday I get online and I'm looking, and then the Harris trend is going this way, and the Trump trend is going that way, or the Trump trend is going this way, and the Harris trend is going that way. And that stands to reason, because when you do a survey, the survey doesn't always survey the broad group of people, but rather targets and groups that may be skewed one way or another. So trend graphs can be dangerous. But if an administrator looks at the trends, for example, of I'll give you a quick, here's a Worcester example. I got put in charge of this one after the fact, after it happened. Global studies regents is a very difficult regents. It's the most difficult regents there is. I know people say, why? Yeah, it's a 2-year regent. It was a 2-year regents. It went from Fred Flintstone to modern day. And it was a tremendous amount of material that had to be learned. And not every teacher necessarily can. And then most kids had 1 year of Mr. Smith and then another year of Mrs. Smith. And sometimes the teaching, their instructional issues weren't in congruence with each other. And so 1 year we had a 40% failure rate. And my boss at the time was out of his mind. He was furious about this. And he says, find out what's going on. So I go in and I start breaking down the trend data. And two things kicked out for me. One was of the 40% of the students who failed, I'm making up the number, I don't remember exactly. 70% of the 40% were female. In other words, the girls were the ones who were failing. Then I looked at the staff, and the staff was terrific. There was a great staff. By coincidence, and this is before I took over, uh, there weren't any female teachers, social studies teachers, teaching 9th or 10th grade. It wasn't hard to see that there was some kind of incongruence here. And I began to take steps to make the teaching staff more equitable by gender. And we took a lot of other steps too. And we eliminated that problem pretty quickly, actually. But that was a matter of looking at the data and breaking it down. Uh, as a state education consult, more times than many times, I was in a district where the district was flagged for minority population poor achievement and for socioeconomic group poor achievement. And the state sends me in to help them figure out why. And it took us maybe a half an hour to realize that the socioeconomic, rather that the minority population were the same kids who were the poor population. Duh. And then we had to figure out what we needed to do to give them additional support. Those are the kinds of things that come out of good, solid data analysis. And those are all worthy information gathering strategies. What I had said to you was, I want you to do a squat. I want you to do a 5Y. I don't need you to show it to me. I just want you to, because that'll emerge back up here when you go. And I recommend it strongly that you say you're going to do a data analysis. I don't need you to do the data analysis. Okay. I don't need you to show it to me. If you haven't got time to do it. If you want to show me things I need, you think might be interesting, that's fine, but it's not a requirement. But I need you to do th four things. So I'm giving you really two and a half. SWOT, 5Y, data analysis, and just pick another one and how you would set it up. That's all. Okay. So that's the first strategy. And then we began to play with uh, additional strategies. And the one I put up as an example was to train all the staff in E&L. So everyone needed something along the lines of what I shared with you before about English instruction. Uh, the issue was not just the E&L teachers being responsible for bringing these babies uh, up to level with the gen ed kids, not that at all, but rather to train all the staff to learn how to integrate their instruction with tactics and techniques. There are some wonderful things, and the Malloy people know this because you have some outstanding experts in this in your program, especially in the doctoral program. And I would imagine that many, or if not all of you, are familiar with Dr. Honigsfeld, who is an internationally famous person on E&L strategies and so forth. And so you bring in a Dr. Honigsfeld, okay, and you train with her, people like her. She's written about a zillion books, and you can or buy the books and do book talks with people. There's all kinds of things that you could do there. Now, I know I'm repeating myself. I apologize if you're sick of hearing this, but I'm a big believer in going back and then going forward. It's an old Madeline Hunter research strategy that many of you have probably never heard of Madeline Hunter, but when it came to instruction, uh, she's a person to look at. I know we talked about what these are supposed to look like, formative, summative assessments, who and when, and what resources you need. I'm not going to belabor them again. I'm going back over to the yellow column now with probable futures. And in the same place I'm not going to demonstrate, I'm not going to pull up the futures wheel, but I did pull it up last video and to show you uh, what that looked like and how to go about doing it. Do I want you to show that you've used the futures wheel? No. I kind of want you to do it, but I don't think there's enough time for you to adequately pull that up. Do I want you to try it? Yes, he shouted. If you're having any, we're going to do this on the 5th. I'm sorry, on the 7th. So we get that muscle even that much more squared away. With the futures wheel, I wanted you to identify the possible and probable futures. And what I want you to do more carefully when you move to the next two-dimensional strategy is to use a cross-impact matrix model. And again, I don't need to see it. I need you to do it because I will know if you didn't do it because it'll sort of spit out. But we're going to do this on the 7th. And then with that, what I did was I took two probable futures and said, well, if the strategy we're looking at is training all the staff, okay, then we got to talk about the fact that a probable future is going to cost money. Lots of ways to save money. Sometimes you just need to find more money in order to make it happen. So the probable future is, how are the teachers going to be affected by this? And maybe, having been a union official for a couple of years, sorry to say that there are union people who think this way. We'll say, well, we don't want the money to go towards innovation. I'm not laughing at that really, because that's less money for us. And so that's a probable future. I'm not saying it's a likely one, okay, but it's a probable one. And it absolutely is a possible one. But it's also depending on how unions operate in your district, uh, could be a probable one too. Okay. And again, even the leadership, even the person who's running this might break out in a rash and say, I'm seeing things happen here I didn't plan, I didn't want to see happen. And I'm not sure I want to bite this off the way I originally thought about it. Maybe we shouldn't be doing this training for everybody. I violently disagree with that premise, but I do see why people would think that. Again, and by the way, you can put more than one idea in each box. And even the board, the board could be influenced by the union. That does happen if you don't already know that. And a board could be doubtful because maybe there's some educators on the board who think that they understand this that much better, or that um, or that they don't buy the premise. They just think their kids should be completely segregated from each other and to it in that fashion. I will tell you that I did a site visit in a district about 3 years ago where huge school, as most high schools are, a huge place, was in a lower economic, the whole district was hurting for money, no question about that, and had a large, the trend was a growing population of E&L children. It was the majority of the kids, if not almost all of them, but it was definitely the majority and growing. That the trend was growing. And so I'm walking around the building with my doctoral student who is an administrator there, and she brings me to a cafeteria. There's a couple of different cafeterias there, and she brings me to the cafeteria, and the thing is locked up like Alcatraz. So I said, "What's this about?" She said, uh, "This is the E&L wing. The kids eat, all the E&L kids have lunch here, and they're not allowed to leave this wing for everything." In other words, they were segregated to the extent that they could do this from the rest of the population. I mean, they outlawed segregation in 1954, folks. And yet, in this particular district, they had a version of segregation going. So I try to control myself, but I needed to understand this better. And we played around. We actually did some 5 wiring on it. And one of the reasons why they had segregated the children was because of gang violence. I almost understood that. There was other ways to deal with not all of them good, but other ways to deal with the gang violence problem for sure. But certainly it was damaging to these babies. Even though they were high school kids, they were still babies to me. And so, uh, and sometimes the board will say, yeah, well, let's do it that way. It's cheaper, and we can make sure that they get uh, concentrated instructional education in that way, when in fact it's not the right way to fly with that. Not in this district, I'm alluding to, but in other districts, it could be an apathy thing. I've run into that from two corners. Uh, One district I was in was almost all Latino. The whole faculty was almost all Caucasian, including the central office staff. Uh, and the kids were not performing well on various achievement tests, not at all. And the central office was deluding themselves into thinking it wasn't, they couldn't do anything about it. Now, the community was largely Latino, but the Latino community wasn't voting in the board elections for numbers of reasons. And so the white majority uh, was continuing to be in power, and they weren't really taking any real positive steps to make that go away. And finally, actually, the Latino population started to vote, and then the leadership began to began to change and became much more sensitive to the academic needs all of the kids had, and so the apathy did go away. And again, if they decide not to go ahead with this strategy because it costs too much money, in the end, all kids suffer, not just the E&L babies. Of any number of reasons, all kids will suffer. So if that's the consequence, that's pretty negative what I put up here. It doesn't have to be that negative. But if that was one tree, one branch of the futures wheel, you'd be given pause to think about, well, how much farther you want to go ahead with that premise or that goal, which often goes back to this other probable future, particularly to the community when the vision is not shared nor embraced. Out of discrimination issues, economic issues, discrimination issues, or just plain ignorance of the need. Uh, and so if the vision isn't shared, a la what I shared with you earlier today, then we have problems. And then if the leadership doesn't either has to revisit the vision and redevelop it, which is not easy, but necessary, that may be what they will feel forced to do by showing data, by bringing kids in to see showing them what's going on, and having people rethink what their purpose is. The board may insist on more information, and then the district leadership would be obligated to go find be prepared with the information to give to the board to process. And then the community may become heavily involved if they begin to see their own children suffering from what's going on and say, let's take another look at this vision. And once again, students are affected if we don't do something about the vision. That's probably well, both of these are probable strategies, uh, probable futures, I should say. But now let's play them through. So what you're going to do is you're going to do the futures wheel. You're going to do the cross impact matrix before I get to you on November 7th. And you're going to begin to see probable futures emerging. And you list them all. You don't comment. You don't necessarily advocate one way or another. You just list these things could happen because of this strategy. And what you're going to be doing is using some good brainstorming processes. I will model on the 7th so that you can begin to creatively problem solve some of these premises. Now, to support these issues, to follow up here briefly, I might have mentioned these two theorists last week. I don't remember. I'm trying to remember his first name. Larry Cuban and I never remember Elmore's first name. Were quoted by Fullen in his chapter about this, where he said that districts are more likely to go superficial. Now, here's a metaphor that you all have heard somewhere along the lines. You know, we know that the Netherlands, Holland, is actually below sea level. In order for those citizens to have a thriving country, which I believe they do have, they had to put up huge dikes off the. I'm not sure if it's the English Channel or the North Atlantic, and to keep the water out and reclaim some land so they could uh, continue to grow economically. The dikes, at least back in the day, were generally, made out of mud and dirt, and maybe some blocks. And there's a story about how actually, I think of two stories. There's a story about holes having sprung in the dike, and water is beginning to spurt through. And I think it was a little boy sticks his thumb in the dike, stops the water, saves the dike, saves the country, until other holes begin to pop open as such. The thumb in the dike word, phrase is one I think we're all familiar with. That's a short-term Band-Aid approach. Easy to do. Therefore, we use it rather than to come up, and I don't know what the other strategy would be about the dikes in truth, unless maybe to rebuild the dikes with stronger materials, or to move away from where the water may be encroaching. That's another strategy. But in any event, the idea that the dike is springing a leak, and you're going to have people standing with their thumbs in the dike, you're going to regret that because it's not a sustainable strategy. It's not a futures-based strategy. Remember, you're working from a 3 to 5 year strategy. I think I said 10, but I'm shortening that now. 3 to 5 year strategy. As an example, to go back to the DQ, if you see AI taking as a future, taking over all instruction, short term, what would that look like 5 years from now? What's the sustainable strategy to rein in, if you think that is what's necessary, AI, to make it a, an aid to us rather than to be threatened by it? I can think of any number of things to go with that. And so that's what that DQ is about. And this whole idea of, oh, the other idea I thought about, and I don't know if everybody has seen the movie, but I see it a couple of times a year when there's nothing else on. Chevy Chase, uh, National Lampoon, Las Vegas. I may not have the right title. You know, they go to Las Vegas. His family goes to Las Vegas, and they take a tour of the Hoover Dam. And as they're walking through the Hoover Dam on a tour, water begins to leak out, and Chevy Chase asks his daughter for bubble gum to plug up the hole, and so he uses the bubble gum to pop up one hole, and then five other holes pop open, and he's doing this to keep the dam from falling apart. And luckily, it does not. But it was, kind of frenetic to take that premise through. So I was going to use this as a projected future, but I think I've done it a different way, so I'm not going to use this chart as such. Understand, I'm just modeling this for you. You can't go anywhere until you know what your goal is. One way to look at this, however, is to perform your own needs assessment between your ears. All right. That's going to squeeze out root cause issues that you may not have been willing to own up to or have not considered. Usually, a real problem has more than one root cause, almost always. Do you need to solve every single root cause? No. In a real strategic plan, yes. In the Malloy strategic plan for creativity and change, I only want you to exercise your muscles. How many root causes someone's going to ask me? I really don't like to answer that question. If it's multiple, go no higher than three, but no less than three. I guess that's another way to put it. I know I've been repetitive, and I'm not apologizing for it. I just want to be. I've always believed that whether I'm a seventh grade social studies teacher or a PD person, or I'm a professor in a professional diploma program, as I am here, that you can't hear these things only. You can only if you heard these things only once, you're not going to get the muscles started. And I want you to have the muscles. If any of you want to send me a template, roughed out, you can make me the happiest person in America. I would be happy to give you feedback on the rough out. I suggest that you do that. Not going to require it because you're all over 21. But I'd be happy to take or talk through on the phone or Zoom with you, or tom-toms, or tin cans and string, or shouting, whatever way you want to communicate with me, I will respond in kind with and more. And you're making me feel sorry for myself, as if I'm not reaching you because I don't hear enough from, except for a couple of you, and I appreciate those folks, but not everybody else. Okie doke, here we go. I'm saying goodbye. I'm saying go Mets. I'm rooting for the Mets too, but not like I root for the Yankees. And go Giants. And I think the Giant game starting in about 15 minutes. He smiled. Have a nice rest of your weekend. And please contact me. Make me feel important.